You're listening to KEXP. You can find us at 90.3 FM in Seattle and streaming worldwide at kexp.org. Also on our free mobile apps. I'm Cheryl Waters. I'm down in the KEXP studios with the weather station. So excited to have them here. I want to remind you this is a listener-powered station and you make all of these wonderful sessions possible. So thank you for helping me welcome the weather station live on KEXP.
It's only the end of an endless time. I wake up in my own bed, the curtain open wide to let in what light the sky has to offer today. It's only the end of an endless time. They don't put that in the paper, you won't hear it on the news. But we knew, and it's just like a sunset about to begin. Maybe at first you can't believe your eyes, the sky all lit in color and light. It's just the same as right before you left. We would stay up late, your head on my chest. We were still in love and the sun went on, making flowers from the mud. We could walk out on the street and buy roses from Spain, strawberries and lilies in November rain. It never occurred to us to have to pay. It's only the end of an endless time. We laughed so much we wore lines around our eyes. You can see it in that picture of us from long ago. How we changed, and it happened so slowly couldn't even say. I gotta find that picture, I want to look again. I used to think that I could see everything that met my eyes. Nobody climb over my fence, no black bag, no gloved hand. I never believed in the robber. I figured everything he took was gone. Nothing to do, nothing to be done. I never believed in the robber. Oh, I never believed in the robber. Thought a robber must hate you to wanna take from you. The robber don't hate you. You never believed in the robber, but the robber never believed in you. Two halves of the same piece divided into two. No, the robber don't hate you. No, the robber don't. Sinners, it was all done real carefully. Make real imagination, make unreal that which can be taken. Turn your gaze from Bandle's light, turn your attention to the sharp knife. Of a lover, I never believed in the robber. Nobody taught me nothing was mine, nothing was mine. Then taken was all the one. Rooted at dawn, rooted at dusk. Hold open the gates for the one of lust. All I saw was the dark. softest leaf and green in my palm, thinking I should get on this dead off my mind. I should really know better than to read the headlines to survive if I see how really can I not just cover my eyes? So tell me, why can't I just cover my eyes? I don't have the heart to conceal my love when I know it is the best of me. If I should offend you, I will show myself out. You can bury me in doubt if you need to. I can walk out in the street, no one need look at me. It is with my eyes I see. I guess that I'm sorry. I am also angry. I will feel all my loss. I will hold my heart inside me. My diamonds turn toward beauty, or turn toward sky unknowing. My down touch is always reaching for green, for soft, for you then. Held in light, I'm always reeling through long nights, feeling of all the many things
That was so beautiful. Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Weather Station live on listener-powered KEXP. And, I just need to pull myself together after that. So gorgeous. You're releasing a new record, How It Is That I Should Look at the Stars, on March 4th. And the first song that we heard is from that. Did I get the title right?
Yeah.
And Endless Time. And you've called these songs not a follow-up to Ignorance, but a companion. And if I'm not mistaken, you even have a song called Ignorance on the record. What were you hoping to expand on with the themes from Ignorance?
Well, the winter I wrote Ignorance, I just wrote a lot of songs. And I always had the vision musically for that record, for Ignorance, of what it would be. And I was writing towards that vision. But then sometimes I'd just be sitting at the piano and I find myself writing this like soft, gentle song that didn't have a place in the album that I imagined. So at a certain point, I just started keeping track of all these other songs I was writing. And then after I finished my record, Ignorance, I just thought, why would I let these songs just languish in a notebook when they're actually really important to me? And I do feel like because they all came from the same time and place, they have a lot of the same themes, and it just felt like a completion of the narrative picture to have both records be in the world.
Well, you just mentioned that when writing both records, you were sitting at the keyboard. And if I understand it, it was a tiny toy keyboard that you wrote these on. Is that right?
Not all of them, but a bunch of the songs from Ignorance, yeah, I wrote on a toy keyboard that had like a drum machine on it. But a lot of these softer songs I did write on a piano at a certain point, yeah.
Well, the songs from Ignorance definitely turned out to be these beautifully instrumented, lush final products. I mean, how do you come to write on that tiny keyboard and then approach adding the instrumentation to that?
Well, you know what? The tiny keyboard was actually a really good tool because it forced me to simplify, right? Because it's like small keys. So it really forced me to just dig into like the simplicity. And actually, like a lot of the songs on Ignorance, like the bass of them is very simple. It's like very simple chords, very simple beats. And then to me, like the more simple the bass of it is, the more the room there is to layer more complexity around it. So that was sort of the guiding principle for Ignorance, was always just like this extremely simple drum part, extremely simple piano part, and then like room for percussion and strings and all of this complexity around it.
Well, this band that's here today sounds absolutely incredible. The way that you represent the songs in this live version is amazing. In studio, you brought in a ton of musicians. Talk about the collaboration in the studio and how you've translated that to a live show.
Man, I mean, I just feel so lucky with all the musicians I'm playing with, both here physically today and back when we made the record. I mean, I live in Toronto, and it was the first time I just made a record in Toronto and just had the luxury of just calling friends and just being like, I know Phil is going to add something amazing on percussion, so I'm just going to call Phil. Or like, I know I'm going to call Christine and she's going to make something amazing on guitar. So I felt like that record really came from knowing the musicians really well through the scene and just knowing exactly what they would bring to the table and then asking them to just bring that. So yeah, I'm really grateful for the musicians that I play with everywhere.
I associate the Weather Station with reinvention. You craft a new sonic landscape pretty much for every record that you release. So you cringed when I said that a little bit.
That's okay, yeah.
And I'm wondering what drives you to explore new sounds on each record. Is that something you can even pinpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe a bit of a... You know, my very first record I made alone, and it was me learning to record and learning to write songs at the same time. So I think for me, the sound of a record has always been just as important as the songs and the lyrics. And I think that each record feels like it has an emotional purpose to be in the world. And I feel that lyrically as I'm writing, but I also feel it in terms of the production and how it's recorded and whether it's hi-fi or lo-fi, because all of these things say so much. So I think that when I look back at what I've done, and I don't think I realized I was doing this when I was younger, I thought I just couldn't make up my mind. But now I realize like every album had like a real emotional, sonic, lyric purpose. And so the clothes that I dress the songs in are just sort of an extension of that purpose.
I love that about your records, how that kind of small moment in time conveys a very large amount of emotion. And I'm wondering how you remember all these tiny moments in your life. Are you a journaler?
I'm not a big journaler, but it's true that a lot of my songs do come from like a real life moment, and then I write a whole song about that. And I think it's just because a lot of my songs come from these memories that are very potent and powerful. And so I'll be sitting at the piano, and there's just a memory that's sort of stuck in my mind. And when I've sort of learned that a technique to bring a song to fruition out of that moment is to write about the memory and try to describe what I remember. And then often it leads me to all of these ideas and metaphors. And I don't think it's necessarily that my memory is so good. I think it's just that the things that caused me to write the song are very strong memories.
Well, I know that climate anxiety and images of the natural world are dotted throughout Ignorance, which you've said sort of wasn't entirely intentional. And I know that it's been a few years since you wrote those songs, but are you able to kind of take me back in time and tell me how the genesis of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd toured a lot through 2018. I came off the road at the end, and it was time to be at home and write songs. And that was right when the IPCC report for 1.5 came out, and it was sort of in the news. And climate change had always been something that I cared deeply about, but I couldn't look at. Like I literally would avoid. I was avoiding the news. I was avoiding looking at it because it was so painful. And then finally that fall when I was home, I finally just started reading. And then once I started reading, I couldn't stop. And I literally went down a rabbit hole of just like obsessively trying to understand, like, how much time do we have? What do we need to do? Can it be turned around? Like, what's going to happen in my lifetime? What would happen in like potential children of mine's lifetime? And it like literally changed me as a person and sent me off this cliff of totally rearranging how I understood the world around me and politics and people. And it's been a really transformative experience and very painful. And I went through a phase of being the really annoying person on social media, yelling at everyone every day and just being like, why don't you pay attention? And then sort of evolved and wound up writing a lot of songs out of this anger and betrayal and sadness and fear. And those songs became these two records. And hopefully now I've attained some sort of state of grace with knowing and paying attention and being able to hold that in my mind, but not always.
I thought it was interesting when I read an article where you talked about being born in the 80s, that climate change is something that's always been in your awareness. That's not true for me. When I was younger, they weren't talking about that. And I'm wondering how that sort of plays into things for you.
It's something I think about a lot, and I feel like millennials and Gen Z, like, it's not been acknowledged of like that this has been a part of our psyche since we were born, since we were children. And what does that do to a person, right? Like to be told since you're a very young child, like, oh, there's this thing that's going to happen. The world's going to end, it's not that the world's going to end, but that's sort of how it's portrayed. The world's going to end. And some narratives of like, it's your fault, like how does that burrow into the psyche of a child, right? And this is something that I feel like as a society, we haven't really acknowledged. And I think that when I talk to people my age and younger, I feel like there's a big well of feelings that we all have that we don't know what to do with, and that many of us haven't even seen, right? Because how do you hold that in your mind? And when you're thinking of your future and retirement and growing old, there's always this uncertainty, right? Of like, when I'm, 75, what will the world be? And I think that previous generations in human history never had to hold all of this information. No generation has ever known so completely so much painful information, and I feel like it's just unacknowledged by our society, and I hope that we find ways to reach each other and to acknowledge those feelings and make sense of them.
It's such an intense and important message, and you've incorporated elements of pop and dance into this record, which is kind of a first that I can think of for the Weather Station releases. And it makes me wonder, what about these upbeat styles sort of serve the message that you're communicating?
Well, I tend to write very dark songs, and I've noticed that there's something so wonderful about pop music. And you can be in a Value Village or walking through the mall and you hear like an ABBA song or something, and it just sort of burrows into your mind. And the lyrics are there with you, right? Like you don't pay attention to them because it's so catchy. And so I was like, wouldn't it be so interesting if I found ways to write songs that just sort of communicate and transcend, genre in that way, where they're just so approachable. But then what would happen if I used that kind of songwriting and that catharsis and that movement to convey some of these more unsettled feelings that I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels. So I sort of loved imagining these songs sort of being out there kind of secretly conveying some of this pain and difficulty in a very comfortable package.
Well, you're definitely not alone in feeling that way, and I think you've completely accomplished that. Thank you so much for coming in today with this fabulous band and sharing these wonderful songs with us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're listening to KEXP. We are powered by you, our listeners, and you can check out so many wonderful videos from bands that have visited KEXP on our YouTube channel. I recommend that you subscribe, and we want to thank the weather station so much for coming in today. You're listening to KEXP Seattle.
Discover new music at listener-powered KEXP.org.